Is there life after death? What truly happens when we die? This question isn't just philosophical, it's deeply personal. At some point, each of us wonders what awaits beyond our final breath. While we can't know with absolute certainty, we're not completely in the dark either. For thousands of years, wisdom traditions across cultures have mapped the territory beyond death. Among these, one text stands out for its extraordinary detail and practical guidance: the Tibetan Book of the Dead. What makes this ancient guide so compelling isn't just its age or cultural significance. It's the remarkable parallels between its descriptions and the accounts of people who have clinically died and returned to tell their stories. These near-death experiences, NDEs, often include elements that match the Tibetan text with uncanny precision. Even more fascinating? Modern science is beginning to catch up, with quantum physics and consciousness research suggesting that awareness might not be confined to the brain after all. In this video, we're going to take a look at one of the most famous and mysterious spiritual texts ever written, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It's a guide that claims to explain what happens after we die. Because here's the thing, whether you believe in an afterlife or not, understanding these perspectives offers practical tools for living with greater awareness, peace, and purpose today. But we're not just stopping there. We'll also explore near-death experiences and hear from people who claim to have seen the other side. Along the way, we'll even touch on what science has to say about all of this. The Tibetan Book of the Dead isn't about death in the way most people think. It doesn't talk about hellfire or pearly gates. It's more like a map, a guide for the soul. Not just for what happens after we die, but for how we should prepare while we're still alive. Its original name, Bardo Thodol, translates to liberation through hearing during the intermediate state. Dating back to the 8th century, it wasn't written to satisfy curiosity about death, but as a practical guide to be read aloud to the dying and recently deceased. The book explains how to handle your mind when you die. It says that when your body stops working, your awareness keeps going. The book teaches you how to understand this new state and guide yourself through it to find freedom. The core concept is Bardo, a word meaning intermediate state or gap. While we typically associate this with the state between death and rebirth, Bardos actually refer to any transitional experience of consciousness. This perspective fundamentally reshapes how we think about death. Instead of an ending, death becomes a transition, one of many transitions we experience throughout existence. Just as we transition from wakefulness to sleep each night, or from childhood to adulthood over years, death represents another transition of consciousness. The revolutionary insight here is that we can prepare for this transition. Just as you might prepare for any major life change, a move to a new country, a career shift, or becoming a parent, you can actively prepare for death. And that preparation benefits you both in life and beyond. According to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the journey after death unfolds across 3 distinct stages or bardas. Each reveals something profound about consciousness and offers practical wisdom for living. The first bardo, the moment of death. This is the moment the soul leaves the body. According to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, a blinding light appears. This light is said to be the pure nature of reality. Everything we ever were, everything we ever will be, all of it exists in that light. The first bardo occurs at the precise moment of death when consciousness separates from the physical body. In this critical transition, you experience what's called the clear light of reality, a radiant, boundless awareness that represents your true nature. Imagine the clearest, most expansive state of mind you've ever experienced, perhaps a moment of profound insight or deep meditation. Then multiply that clarity 1,000-fold. That's how the text describes this first encounter beyond death. But here's the crucial part. This isn't described as a distant heaven or spiritual realm. It's presented as your fundamental nature, the basic awareness that's been present all along but usually obscured by mental activity and physical sensations. It's not something new, it's what's always been there beneath the surface noise of everyday life. The text states that if you recognize this clear light as your own natural awareness, you achieve immediate liberation. No heaven, no hell, no reincarnation needed, just immediate recognition of what you've always been. Here's where it gets really fascinating. Most people miss this opportunity because they've never learned to recognize this clear light during life. Without preparation, this unfamiliar experience can be overwhelming. Fear arises and awareness contracts, retreating from liberation into the second stage. Think about how often we miss moments of insight in everyday life because they don't fit our familiar patterns. Maybe you've had flashes of profound understanding that quickly got buried under habitual thinking. The first bardo teaches that recognition of our true nature is both our greatest opportunity and our greatest challenge. The practical solution? Learn to recognize clear awareness in life through meditation. By becoming familiar with the nature of your mind through practice, you develop the capacity to recognize it at death. This isn't religious dogma, it's practical training for the most significant transition you'll ever face. The second bardo, the bardo of visions. If you miss the opportunity of the first bardo, you enter the second bardo, the bardo of experiencing reality. Here, consciousness encounters vivid visions, both peaceful and terrifying. In this stage, the soul sees visions, some beautiful, some terrifying. These visions aren't random. They're created by the mind. They reflect everything we haven't dealt with, our fears, regrets, anger, but also our peace, love, and joy. It's like a mirror showing us everything we carry inside. This bardo could be describing real life too. Think about it, we project our fears onto situations. We get stuck in cycles. We see danger where there isn't any, or miss peace when it's right in front of us. The bardo of visions teaches us that our mind shapes our reality. The text describes encountering 42 peaceful deities representing qualities like compassion, wisdom, and patience, followed by 58 wrathful deities embodying the same energies in more intense forms. These aren't external gods or demons but manifestations of your own mind, projections of your unresolved emotions, fears, and aspirations. The crucial teaching is that these appearances, however overwhelming, are projections of your own consciousness. The text repeatedly instructs, do not be afraid. These are the natural radiances of your own mind. Recognize them as such. This insight applies powerfully to daily life. When strong emotions arise, whether joy, anger, desire, or fear, can you recognize them as aspects of your consciousness rather than external realities that control you? Can you develop the awareness to see that your perceptions are shaped by your mental states? The second bardo reminds us that our experience of reality, both in life and after death, is profoundly shaped by the quality of our awareness. What we perceive as out there is inseparable from the perceiving mind. The practical solution? Develop emotional awareness through mindfulness practices. Learn to recognize thoughts and feelings as mental events rather than absolute truths. This skill serves you in daily challenges and prepares you for the intense experiences of the dying process. The third bardo, the bardo of rebirth. If liberation hasn't occurred in either previous stage, you enter the third bardo, the state where rebirth into another life is determined. Here, consciousness experiences increasingly concrete appearances, moving toward physical rebirth. During this phase, you experience visions of possible future lives, drawn toward particular possibilities based on karmic patterns, your accumulated habits and tendencies. The text describes being blown by the winds of karma toward particular situations aligned with these patterns. Imagine being drawn toward certain situations by an almost magnetic pull based on your strongest habitual patterns. If anger has been your dominant emotion, you might be pulled toward circumstances where anger will continue to play a central role. If compassion has been your practice, you'll be drawn toward situations where that quality can further develop. What's remarkable is that even in this final stage, consciousness retains some degree of choice. The text provides instructions for closing the door of the womb, techniques for avoiding unwanted rebirths, and directing consciousness toward more favorable circumstances. This suggests that awareness and intention matter even in this late stage. The quality of mindfulness cultivated during life continues to influence outcomes after death. Strong habitual patterns will automatically direct consciousness unless awareness has been developed to override these tendencies. The implications for life are profound. How often do we find ourselves drawn into situations by force of habit rather than conscious choice? How frequently do we recreate familiar patterns despite their painful consequences? The third bardo teaches that awareness of our tendencies gives us the power to change direction. The practical solution? Work with your habitual patterns in life. Notice recurring thoughts, emotional reactions, and behaviors. Practice making conscious choices rather than following automatic patterns. Each time you do this in life, you strengthen your capacity to navigate consciously after death. While the Tibetan Book of the Dead offers one of the most detailed maps of the afterlife journey, it's not alone. Remarkably similar concepts appear across cultures and traditions, suggesting these insights might reflect universal aspects of consciousness rather than merely cultural beliefs. Ancient Egyptian journey through Dewey. The ancient Egyptians developed an elaborate understanding of the afterlife, codified in texts like their own Book of the Dead. According to their cosmology, the deceased would undertake a journey through Duat, the underworld, facing various challenges and judgments. Central to this journey was the weighing of the heart against the feather of Ma'at, truth. This ceremony, presided over by Anubis and judged by Osiris, determined whether the soul would continue to the paradise of the field of reeds or meet a second death. What's fascinating is how this parallels aspects of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, particularly the emphasis on the mind's quality at death, the necessity of guides through the afterlife journey, and the idea that one's actions in life determine post-death experiences. Also, the ancient Greek mystery traditions, particularly those associated with Eleusis, taught initiates about the soul's journey after death. These teachings were considered so sacred that revealing them was prohibited on pain of death. From what scholars have pieced together, these mysteries included instruction about navigating the afterlife, recognizing divine figures, and achieving liberation from the cycle of rebirth. Plato's famous myth of air describes a soul's journey after death, including choice of future lives based on previous character, remarkably similar to the third Bardo's description. Across indigenous cultures worldwide, shamanic traditions describe techniques for the soul to travel beyond the physical body, both during life and after death. Shamans train to navigate these realms consciously, often serving as guides for others making the transition of death. The consistent elements across these traditions include the continuity of consciousness beyond physical death, the importance of preparation and guidance for the journey, the influence of one's mental state and life actions on post-death experiences. These cross-cultural parallels raise fascinating questions. Could these diverse traditions be describing the same territories of consciousness from different cultural perspectives? Might they reflect universal aspects of human experience rather than merely cultural constructs? Traditional science has generally assumed that consciousness is produced by the brain and therefore ceases when brain function ends. However, emerging research is challenging this assumption in ways that make ancient perspectives on consciousness after death scientifically intriguing. For science, it doesn't confirm an afterlife, but it doesn't fully rule it out either. Consciousness is still a mystery. Some scientists believe it's just the brain. Others think it could be more, something that exists beyond the body. Quantum physics, for example, shows that reality is way stranger than we ever imagined. Some theories suggest consciousness might exist outside time and space. Bottom line, science hasn't closed the door. In fact, it might be quietly cracking it open. Thousands of people around the world have had near-death experiences. They were declared dead. No pulse, no brain activity, and then they came back. And many of them described the same things. A feeling of peace, a tunnel or light, seeing loved ones or spiritual beings, reviewing their life, being told it wasn't their time. Sound familiar? It lines up shockingly well with the Tibetan Book of the Dead. These people aren't trying to push a belief. Many of them weren't even spiritual before their experiences. But after, their lives changed. They started caring less about money or status and more about meaning and connection. Are they proof of life after death? Not exactly. But they make it harder to say death is just the end. Different cultures have developed fascinating perspectives on death and what follows. These variations offer additional insights that complement the Tibetan view. Unlike many Western approaches that avoid death, Mexican culture celebrates it through Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead. This tradition views death not as an ending but as a continuation of life in another form, with the deceased remaining connected to the living. The holiday creates space for both honoring ancestors and confronting mortality through humor, art, and celebration. This cultural approach demonstrates how familiarity with death can transform fear into acceptance and even joy. In Norse tradition, death in battle led to Valhalla, not merely as a reward but as continuation of purpose. Warriors who died courageously would feast with Odin and prepare for Ragnarok, the final battle. This perspective suggests that how we face death reflects our deepest values and that purpose can extend beyond physical life. The courage cultivated in life becomes essential in death, a theme that echoes the Tibetan emphasis on mental preparation. Zen tradition approaches death with remarkable directness. Zen masters often meditated on corpses or wrote death poems before dying. The famous Zen master Dogen taught that to study Buddhism is to study the self, to study the self is to forget the self, and to forget the self is to be enlightened by all things. This radical acceptance of impermanence aligns with the Tibetan tradition's emphasis on recognizing the nature of mind beyond temporary forms. Both suggest that confronting death directly leads to profound liberation in life. So, is there life after death? The Tibetan Book of the Dead, along with cross-cultural wisdom traditions and emerging scientific perspectives, suggests several fascinating possibilities. Consciousness may continue beyond physical death in ways that maintain personal identity and moral continuity. The transition through death may involve recognizable stages, including opportunities for growth depending on our level of awareness. Our state of mind at death, and the mental habits we've developed throughout life, may significantly influence what we experience after death. Preparation through meditation, mindfulness, contemplation on death, and ethical living can help us navigate this transition with greater awareness. Whether or not consciousness continues indefinitely after death, engaging with these teachings transforms how we live right now. What's particularly valuable about this approach is that it doesn't require religious conversion or belief. The practices that prepare us for death according to the Tibetan tradition, mindfulness, compassion, ethical living, and direct investigation of consciousness, benefit us regardless of whether its cosmology proves literally true. If consciousness continues after death as the tradition suggests, these practices prepare us for that journey. If it doesn't, these same practices still lead to greater peace, compassion, and meaning during the life we know we have. Whether you're convinced there's life after death or skeptical of any afterlife claims, these 5 practices derived from the Tibetan Book of the Dead can transform your relationship with both living and dying. 1. Develop awareness through meditation. Regular meditation practice helps you recognize the nature of your mind, the clear, spacious awareness beneath thoughts and emotions. Start with just 10 minutes daily, focusing on your breath and gently returning attention whenever your mind wanders. With practice, you'll begin to recognize the witness consciousness that remains constant amid changing thoughts and feelings. This practice directly correlates with preparing for the first bardo, developing familiarity with clear awareness that will be crucial at the moment of death. Even if you're skeptical about afterlife states, this practice demonstrably reduces anxiety and increases well-being during life. 2. Practice recognizing mental projections. Throughout your day, notice how your mind colors experience through expectations, judgments, and emotional states. When strong emotions arise, mentally label them, anger arising, anxiety present, to create space between you and the feeling. This simple practice develops the discernment needed to navigate both life's challenges and whatever may follow death. This skill corresponds to preparation for the second bardo, learning to recognize that perceptions are shaped by mental states rather than existing as objective realities. Practically speaking, this awareness helps break the grip of negative emotional patterns regardless of your beliefs about death. 3. Contemplate impermanence regularly. Take 5 minutes each morning to reflect on life's impermanence. Rather than inducing fear, this practice cuts through denial and trivial concerns, revealing what truly matters. Ask yourself, what would I focus on today if I knew my time was limited? Then align your actions with this clarity. This contemplation prepares consciousness for the reality of change, both in life and through death. It also serves as a powerful prioritization tool, helping you focus on what genuinely matters rather than getting lost in distractions. 4. Cultivate ethical awareness. At day's end, review your actions and their impact on others. Notice patterns of behavior that create suffering or well-being. Gradually shift toward choices that benefit both yourself and others. This isn't about rigid morality, but about recognizing that how we treat others shapes our own consciousness and experience. This practice relates to preparation for the third bardo, developing positive mental patterns that will guide consciousness even when deliberate control is difficult. It also creates tangible improvements in relationships and social connections during life. 5. Live fully in the present. Use death awareness to enhance life, not diminish it. Let mortality be your teacher, revealing the preciousness of each moment. Regularly ask, am I using this limited time in ways that reflect my deepest values? Then make adjustments accordingly. This approach embodies the ultimate purpose of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, not just to prepare for death, but to transform life through that preparation. It cuts through procrastination and helps you live with purpose and presence. The bottom line? The Tibetan Book of the Dead reminds us that death is not merely an ending but a transition, potentially a gateway to greater awareness if we approach it with the right preparation. Whether we interpret its teachings literally or metaphorically, they offer us a precious opportunity to live with greater presence, purpose, and peace. By preparing for death consciously, we transform our experience of life. Perhaps that's the ultimate answer to our question about life after death. Whether consciousness continues beyond the physical body, engaging with this possibility mindfully helps us die without regret and live with greater meaning. Awake to the extraordinary opportunity that each moment offers. The mystery of what happens after death remains open. But one thing is certain, how we relate to that mystery profoundly shapes the quality of our living. And in that insight lies a solution available to each of us, regardless of our beliefs about what follows our final breath.